Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Bear Down Ballers here on the Field of 68. I'm Ryan Wall, joined as always by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, on Friday night, the Arizona Wildcats suffered their first loss, 103 to 88. The Wisconsin Badgers beat Arizona at the Kohl Center. Arizona drops down to 17 in the rankings. Wisconsin's in the rankings for the first time this year. How are you doing? And what are your first thoughts about what took place this past Friday night?
I'm doing good. What a weekend for college basketball. We had some great classics with Michigan State, Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, and this great matchup that happened in Madison on Friday. But I'm excited to get in and talk about some Arizona basketball.
Yeah, well, they lost this game, like I said, and they lost 103 to 88 by 15 points. And the star of this show, I don't want to start with Arizona. I want to start with somebody from Wisconsin, and that is John Tanya. This guy was unbelievable. And if you rarely see a 40-point performance by a college player, 41 points, 6 rebounds, and Jordan 21 for 22 from the free throw line. Just unbelievable. And he was just really a problem all night long for the Arizona defense. To me, KJ Lewis and Jaden Bradley and Love, they were just being way too aggressive on defense. And that's what led to Tanya hitting 21 free throws. What'd you think of him? And what'd you think of this Arizona defense not being able to slow him down?
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, it's super hard to do in the college game just because of how quick it seems the game can go over the course of time with the two 20-minute halves. And the way you do it is you score when the time's not running, which would be by free throws, or you hit a bunch of threes. And he did both of these things. He was 2 points shy of setting the or tying the Wisconsin single game record, which Frank Kaminsky had, I think 43 back in 2014. But yeah, he played great, and I think like you said, I think one of the biggest things was just the defensive approach it seemed that Arizona had, and I don't think they're expecting how quick Tanjay's first step was, and I think that was a big thing I noticed on a lot of his fouls were driving fouls to where a defender just wouldn't slide his feet quick enough and he'd get tangled up in their feet and he'd get tripped, and that's a blocking foul. And so that accompanied with him as well as the entire Wisconsin Badgers team and just making free throws. And I know Bo Ryan was in the crowd, and that was one of his big main discipline things is his team, when they get to the line, they're going to make more free throws than you. And they certainly punished Arizona in that statistic department in this game.
And Jordan, it wasn't just the free throw department. They destroyed Arizona in every the three statistical shooting stats, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and like you mentioned, free throw percentage. Arizona only 37% from the field, 17% from deep, and 70% from the free throw line. 70% from free throw line is not horrible, but when you're going against a team who's making almost 90% of theirs, it's going to be hard to beat them. And Arizona, to me, seemed like they weren't prepared from the start of this game. Arizona came out, they were down by 18 points at the most in the first half of this game. I believe the game's Wisconsin started on a 7-0 run, and it just seemed like on offense Arizona didn't really have a game plan. It didn't seem like they were running a lot of sets, and it seemed like they just kept passing the ball around the arc, and no one really wanted to take that shot. And I really feel like especially when you're on the road, you cannot get off to a slow start. Maybe when you're at home, you can get off to a slow start, but when you're in a loud Kohl Center, that place, that crowd was, I was really impressed by that crowd. I think that made a big impact on Arizona. So yeah, I really think that the away aspect and the shooting percentages were really the downfall, were a big downfall for this team in this game.
Yes, completely agree. Wisconsin has a great record in the Kohl Center. And one thing I don't want to understate, I think, is the emotion that this game seems to have. Last year at McHale, it was, oh, we haven't beaten these guys in years. And the last two t times we played, it was for major bragging rights of hanging a banner in the arena, and Arizona didn't get it done. And so there was so much emotion in McHale last year, and it was the same this year, but it was different because it was a celebration. Bo Ryan was back in the building. They were putting up a banner for him. He just got inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. They brought the 2014 and 15 teams back. So there was just a lot more, I think, emotion, and it's awesome because I feel like this game kind of is almost in a way a weird like rivalry that doesn't get played for years, and it's been awesome. I'm so happy Tommy and Greg Gard were able to bring this game and especially put it on campus. I think that's huge for the fan bases, and like you said, like, and Tommy said it in his post game, like he wants to put his team in uncomfortable positions. This is, I think, one of their first true road games in November that they've played over the last few years, and it's Tommy Lloyd's first loss in November, and it was a hard environment. The crowd was rolling from start to finish, and Wisconsin didn't go away. They took punches, they delivered punches. It was a great game. I'm excited to see how Arizona can respond.
Yeah, it was a great game. You mentioned that atmosphere when you're playing at your own school, and I totally agree. Not just this game, this was great that it was held at Wisconsin, and last year Arizona went to Duke, and this year Duke will go to Arizona this week. We'll get into that later, but I think all of these big time matchups between Power Four schools should be played at one of the opponents' home buildings at in their campus. But getting back to this game, to me, but like I said, besides the rough shooting struggles, the second thing was 32 fouls in this game. That equaled the amount of fouls that Arizona had that they committed in the first two games combined. 32 is what
Mhm.
they committed, and they did that in one game. That just shows to me, like I said, I question if they were prepared enough. That goes into that factor. They weren't prepared to me. They weren't disciplined. And if you're not going to play and and disciplined basketball and shoot at a high percentage, if you can't do even one of those things, you're not going to have a chance to win. I mean, they didn't even lose this game by 20 points, which is pretty surprising because Wisconsin also committed 31 fouls, so there was over
Mhm.
60 fouls committed. There was over 80 foul shots in this game. It seemed like every couple seconds another team was at the foul line. It was just insane. But yeah, I really think it's really tough to win when you foul at that type of level. What did you think about that, and do you think they can improve upon that?
Definitely. And I think it's great you bring it up that both teams were fouling. The game was stopping on both sides of the floor every other minute, it seemed. And that's why I think that the free throw category in a game like this, when neither team is really kind of getting into the flow with how the game's being called, and it was called a very tight game. And sometimes you
Yeah.
love it, sometimes you hate it, because in any given possession, there's probably at least one foul somewhere going on, whether if it's a post trying to post up and the defender's trying to reestablish himself, or there's a bump on a cutter. There's usually a foul every single possession. So yeah, I think both teams, I don't think really set themselves up well in this game. But even if you're not going to set yourself up, it's how you respond out of that, and Arizona's just free throw shooting 28 of 40 like is bad, but I think on top of it, the amount of the front end of misses they had on one-on-ones, I think even tells more of a story because there's at least five extra free throws in there if they don't miss the front end. So that's 17 points already right there that you're missing out on when nobody's contesting you. So that's a
Mhm.
discipline issue, I think, and that's just a lack of focus, I think, especially when they're just end of practice shots that you can get by yourself in a gym. And
100%.
I don't know any other way to really say it, but I think that was the biggest difference, and especially when you got Tanjay, who's 20, what was he, 21 of 22? Like
Hmm.
that's insane. And he almost shot as many as the entire or made as many as the entire Arizona lineup, and they shot almost 20 extra free throws than him. So I think that's inexcusable. And I don't maybe that isn't a huge coaching point of pressure from Tommy for this team, but it's infuriating, especially last year. There were so many struggles with Umar Ballo at the end of games, and he's the rebounder, but we can't play him in the end of games because he doesn't make free throws, and now it's the entire team all of a sudden. So I think this is a thing that could haunt this team going into conference play with how tight this conference is,
Hmm.
because there are going to be games where you're going to lose because of 1 or 2 points, and if it's at the free throw line, that's pretty inexcusable.
Yeah, and like you brought up with, and when we're talking about Arizona fouled a lot, but Wisconsin fouled a lot too. But that's not the point for me. If both
Mhm.
teams foul a lot, if both teams like don't foul at all, then it's even. If both teams foul 20 times or 40 times or 60 times, just making up random numbers, then it's going to come down to what team shoots better. And Wisconsin
Definitely.
shot almost 90%, Arizona 70%. And Jordan, the number one guy that to me was the biggest problem from the line, and it's inexcusable from a point guard to shoot 7 for 13 from the free throw line. I know he did lead the team in scoring by 5 points, and that's Jaden Bradley, 22 points, 6 rebounds, didn't have an assist. I mean, this team, I mean, that's another thing. When have you seen a team have 6 assists in one game? I've never even. They had 6 assists on 28 field goals. I've never. I don't know if I've ever seen that. As well as Jaden Bradley scored the ball, and I did like his aggressiveness getting to the rim, and I do love when players get fouled, and I'm going to continue to encourage him, and the team should as well. He needs to get fouled. He needs to be aggressive because more often than not, he's not going to shoot under about 50% or so like that. But yeah, he was the biggest problem from the free throw line. But the
Mhm.
best player to me overall, because none of these Arizona players were perfect in this game. Either, somebody scored a lot, didn't shoot well from three or from the field. But I thought Trey Townsend to me impressed me the most. 17 points, 4 rebounds, 6 for 10 from the field. I mean, he didn't hit a three-pointer, only 0 for 2. But this is what I thought when they got Trey Townsend is I thought they were going to get a dominant power forward, a guy that really could score the ball efficiently or towards the rim, and I really was impressed with him. But Jordan, and before we get into Duke, we're gonna take a break, and when we come back, I want to get our final thoughts on this game versus Wisconsin, what we think they can improve upon in their next game, and then we're going to preview this Friday's game versus the Duke Blue Devils. All right, Jordan, let's get back into it. I just mentioned Jaden Bradley and Trey Townsend, the two leading scorers for Arizona. They both had some positives. There were a couple negatives, as I mentioned, with Bradley's free throw shooting. But what'd you think of those two, and what stood out to you against Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think they were really the only really big positives of Arizona offensively, especially when they got in the half court sets. And it kind of felt like I was watching kind of Sean Miller's old offense run, and it was like either there'd be a ball drive or they would isolate a player in the post, whether that was Townsend, which he was very successful in the game, or even Krivas, who got pretty heavy minutes. They try to isolate him in the post a lot. And I think that's a huge dynamic that Townsend brings, especially with his interesting size and skill at his position. I think creates a lot of matchup problems. I'm really excited to see his matchup against Cooper Flag. I think those two guys are probably going to be isolated against each other quite a bit on Friday. But I loved what I saw from Townsend, especially in those isolated posts, because Nolan Winter and Steven Corral, who are the 4 and 5 pretty much for Wisconsin, they're bigger than him, and he played really, really well against them. And Jaden Bradley, I think once we see, which I'm still hoping we'll see a Caleb Love explosion. I think the way they've kind of played the first 2 games is they're kind of expecting him just to go off every so often, but they need to figure out what they're going to do when he doesn't go off. And that's exactly what happened in Wisconsin, and they still didn't really know what they were gonna do. And so, with that being said, I think Jaden Bradley needs the ball in his hands more. Just how he can manipulate the ball in his hands and manipulate defenders going one way or the other. He had a great game. I think outside of his free throw percentage, he was, I thought, easily the bright spot of this team offensively.
Yeah, and you just mentioned a bright spot, the leading scorer, but we got to get into him. You just mentioned him a little bit, Caleb Love. That game was Caleb Love in a nutshell. Caleb Love's existence in college basketball in a nutshell. 2 for 13 from the field, 0 for 6 from three, 6 points, 2 steals, 2 assists, 2 rebounds. This was just a flat out to say it was a terrible performance from Caleb Love. The one thing that I've always said about Caleb Love, and that he still sometimes he does it, but not really. When he's not on early in the game, that's when he needs to cut it off. That's when the team, the coaches, they have to tell him, if you start 0 for 3 from 3-point range, you shouldn't take another three. I'm not saying, I always say this, if a shot's wide open, you got to take it, or then defenses start to guard you differently. But Caleb Love was horrible in this game, got a technical as well. It's just not what you want to see from. That's the guy that's supposed to be the leader of this team. When we talked about this in our first episode weeks ago, I was expecting a more mature version of Caleb Love, a guy who's more consistent in his last year. I mean, this guy's been around for so many years at this point. It seems like he just still has some of these bad qualities that he can't get out of, the rotation for what he's doing out there. And yeah, I really expected Caleb Love to have a good game in this one. And it really just seems that it's not even his efficiency was so horrible, and that's a big part. But for me, they just don't treat him like on the offense, even through the first couple sets. They don't treat him like he's far and above the best player on the team. Like he gets way more shots than everyone. Yeah, he's still finished with second most shots on the team, but he doesn't get to me, he needs to get more touches. He needs to be more involved in the offense. So then so then he doesn't force as many shots, because that's, to me, I feel like his biggest problem is he's forcing shots, and he can't do that. What do you think about this showing from Caleb Love?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think you said it correctly. He's forcing threes, and on his drives he's uncontrolled. And I think that's a big thing.
Horrible.
He was complaining for a lot of fouls, but if you're jumping into the air into guys and they go straight up, they're not going to call a foul. They happen a few times even with KJ Lewis in that game. And I just think in that 15:35 mark in that first half, when you're talking to a first year starter that's a sophomore and your teammate is having to like push you away from him after you push him from a fifth, sixth year guy that's been the face of your program the last 2 years and pretty much the one of the faces of college basketball over the last 4 or 5 years. It's pretty inexcusable, and I really hope he bounces back. But it was not a good look for him or the program because for him that was the play outside of a crazy steal and dunk he had. That was the play that just put him in the trash the rest of the game. Um,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and I hope he can recover from that, but that was not a great look, and I thought that was very demoralizing for the team in this specific game.
Yeah, and something I've said from the start of the year is that this team's going to go as far as Caleb Love takes them there, and that doesn't mean that he's going to have to lead the team in scoring, but that means this team's not going to win with him scoring 6 points. It doesn't matter how well Townsend or Bradley do, or KJ Lewis, who had 15 points, and Toby Awaka, who had 9 points, 13 rebounds. The guy is really coming into his own, an elite rebounder, especially for an undersized guy. I've been impressed with Awaka. But Caleb Love needs to play better. He needs to be more efficient for this team to take that next step. But overall, this wasn't what we were expecting. We both predicted an Arizona win in this game. They came out on the other side of it. They moved to 2-1 on the year. They're still have a big chance this Friday, Jordan. And let's get into it. This Friday, Arizona hosted Duke Blue Devils, and this game, is really just a matchup between two of the premier programs in college basketball. It's not a top 10 matchup as it was supposed to be preseason. Duke lost, Arizona lost. They're both, or Arizona's 2-1, Duke's 3-1 right now. But throughout the Tommy Lloyd era, there's been no better team in basketball that has bounced back better off of a loss than Arizona. They've proven it time and time again the last couple of years, and there's no better environment to come home to than the Arizona fan base at McCall Center. This game should be, I think this has a chance to be one of the best environments at the McCall Center in the last 10 years. Cooper Flag, the projected number one overall pick for this draft. The guy is one of the biggest superstars to enter college basketball in a long, long time. He's averaging a little over 16 a game, 2 steals, almost 2 blocks, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting the ball pretty well, 44% from the field, 78 from the field. They probably have a really well-rounded team. Tyrese Proctor's back. Con Kneppel, the other freshman, the guy
Hmm.
is a really good shooter. And then they got Caleb Foster, veteran guard. What do you think of this matchup? And do you think that Arizona is going to bounce back in this one?
Yeah, I'm excited to see, and I think one thing that I was going to agree with you from the Wisconsin game was it just didn't seem like they were super prepared going in, and that's pretty normal with this early in the season. Your assistants and their scouting reports are very crucial early in the game or early in the season, and Wisconsin did that really well with Arizona, and Arizona did not do that super well with Wisconsin. They were not in gap help. They were not helping a lot. They're primarily going one-on-one defensively. But now, like both of these teams, they've got a lot of film from each other. They've got a lot of film from that Kentucky game, which Duke's had some great runs, but they also had some really bad runs where Kentucky kind of swallowed them defensively. So it I think both teams will have a lot better idea of what the other team's going to look like and what they're going to do. As I said, I'm really excited for the Cooper Flag, and I think Trey Townsend's going to be one of the primary defenders on him. So I'm excited to see how he's going to do that. And just with Cooper Flag, especially in that Kentucky game, just his ability to score. He reminds me a lot of KD in the way that he can score from the mid range, from drives, from the three. And just like his scoring and his style ability reminds me a lot of KD. So I'm excited to see how Arizona can defend and some of the intrinsic details they're going to do defensively that they didn't do against Wisconsin.
Yeah, he is such a talented player. It's really high praise to compare him to one of the best scoring players of all time. But
Yep.
through 4 games, like I said, he's averaging 16. Did have 26 against Kentucky last week, 26 and 11. But he only had 8 points against Wofford in their last game on Saturday. He's been up and down. His two previous games were 18 and 13. But he is the one thing that's been stable is the blocks. I mean, he's had over 2 blocks in 3 of the 4 games. He's had at least 7 rebounds in every game, 2 games with 11. I mean, he's a rebounding machine. The guy can block shots from anywhere. He's so athletic. But a guy you mentioned Trey Townsend, I do think he'll be the primary defender. But two other guys I want to see go to guard him. The first guy that came to mind is KJ Lewis. I think for a small ball on a bigger guy, KJ Lewis, I think it kind of just thinking about they're different but way different positions, but like when Draymond Green in a couple years ago when they were in their prime run, when he would guard big
Mhm.
centers, he would be so aggressive. He was always so much smaller, but he would be so handsy on the ball. He would be really physical, even if he's not as tall. If you're physical, it could kind of slow those guys down, and I think that's what showed with Cooper Flag. If you can kind of be physical and slow him down from the start, I think he's at least his like I said, he's going to add the rebounds, the blocks, but I think the offensive end is actually containable. I don't think obviously he's
Mhm.
only in his first 5 games in college basketball. He's still growing, getting better as a player, but I think this Duke team's good, but I think if you slow him down, if you don't let him go for 25, 30, I mean, I think Arizona actually matches up pretty well against Duke. What do you
I
think?
completely agree. I
What
think
do you
they
think
match
about
up.
those
Yeah.
matchup about that matchup about KJ?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I especially with later in the game against Kentucky with how Flag just had a hard time responding to help when he would get doubled and when hands would come in. I think that's a huge thing that Arizona is really going to need to turn to against Wisconsin. They were switching every single ball screen, every single off ball screen. They're switching everything, and that led Wisconsin to a lot of easy points and wide open threes. And so I think that's going to need to get really cleared up quickly for this game. But I agree. I think they if they have a very similar recipe that Kentucky had, I think this game is very manageable defensively if they're able to kind of put an all hands on deck and helping from everywhere. And that's what they're gonna throw multiple bodies at him. So I'm excited to see how even how he can respond, how he plays through that, because that I'm sure he felt super demoralized that last possession against Kentucky when they just stripped it from him after a half spin away from his primary defender. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a chess match, I think, for sure. Like how are they going to
100%.
respond? Um, and I think this is going to be where you're going to see where I think coaching can separate these teams too, and the style of how they play. I know we're in an analytics era now, and that was the biggest thing I heard from the Kentucky Duke game was Duke was shooting mid ranges the whole time, and they made more shots, but Kentucky was hitting more threes, and that's why they won. And so it'll be interesting. I think I think that will be the ultimate deciding factor of who can shoot the long ball best in this game.
Yeah.
And in McHale, I've got my money on Arizona and how Zona Zoo is going to be able to impact that game and people that aren't super familiar or don't have any student ties. Zona Zoo's been really big on getting students to other games so they can possibly get a ticket for this game. So McHale's going to be rocking for this game. I'm really excited for the matchup.
Yeah, Zona Zoo is the best for my money. It's the best student fan base in the country. And another matchup that came to my mind while you're talking of for Cooper Flag is Toby Awaka. He even is an inch shorter than him, but he's more of a physical presence. And I really
Mhm.
think when you mentioned he's a great, he has the abilities to score from three levels, but when he's in that mid range and he's driving downhill, I really think Toby Awaka, he's a physical player. I think he can slow him down. And I totally agree. I think they're going to try many different players. And I really think it's going to come down to that's the thing about Duke is two of their main guys, Con Kneppel and Cooper Flag are in their first year, first couple games. So
Yep.
it's so hard to predict which version of them you're going to see. But overall, I think if they can keep those two guys in check, Tyrese Proctor is a good player, but he's not a guy to me that's going to make or break and really hurt you. I think he's a good
Yep.
guard, but I really think that Arizona still, I think Arizona is a deeper team. I think their bench Arizona has been a little better than I even expected. I really
Mhm.
like Arizona's guard still, and Caleb Love. I still, when I think of him, you think of the bad games, but it's impossible not to think about the big moments. The guy is a big time player, and you know Caleb Love. He had a big game last year at Duke, a huge monster game when they got the job done there. And I think Caleb Love is going to go off for 30 points in this game against Duke. He's the Duke killer. I think Arizona's going to beat Duke. I think Arizona's going to beat him by 10 points. I really do. I think this is going to be a good game. It's going to be really close through the first half and through the first half of the second half, but I think Arizona's going to pull away in the end. I think that, yeah, I think Arizona, like you mentioned, at home, they're one of the hardest teams to beat. And yeah, I really think that's going to be a difference. But does anything else stick out to you from this matchup?
Yeah, I love that prediction. Last year, Caleb Love only scored 11 in that game, but Arizona's entire starting lineup was in double figures. To where on the other side of the court, Duke, their two leading scorers were Jeremy Roach and Filipowski. Flip had 25 and Roach had 17. Nobody else got into double figures. So It'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see how the stats line up. Like I said, I do think the 3-point shot will probably be the biggest tell between who can shoot it at a better efficiency. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
I'm
agree.
excited for it. I'm excited to see Caleb Love rebound and have a great game, especially against his arch nemesis Duke, who just keeps following him even after he left North Carolina.
I agree. And we both have Arizona winning this game. We both had
Mhm.
obviously Arizona winning against Wisconsin. So hopefully we don't become a bad luck charm here. And
Yeah,
Arizona,
I was just a
Arizona,
year early.
yeah,
I was just a year early on the
you
Wisconsin
were,
one for our
you
viewers
were.
that
Yeah, I
knew I
remember.
picked them
I
last year
remember.
when they got
Yeah, I
blown
remember.
out.
Yeah, yeah. So it didn't work that time. Worked this time. Arizona's actually won the last three matchups of this series, and Arizona's up 6-4 all time in the all-time series. The last time this game took place in Tucson was in 1990. Arizona beat Duke in a double overtime game, and the last time that Arizona lost to Duke was in 2000. It was in Minneapolis. They lost by 10 points. So those are some quick nuggets. But yeah, this game, it's only the third time ever that they've played at the McCall Center in Tucson, Arizona. Arizona is 2-0 at the McCall Center. So that's good to hear. But yeah, overall, I think this should be a great matchup. Let's hope Arizona could move to 3-1, can work their way back into the top 10 in the country here. But thanks everybody for tuning in, for watching, viewing, liking, and subscribing. I'm Brian Wall.